Stories from around the corner
and around the country.
You're listening to All the Best.
Proudly supported by the Art Gallery of New South Wales.
You're listening to All the Best from FBI Radio 94.5. I'm Gabriella Acaria. Have you ever been told that you can't do something? This week, we explore two stories about letting go of the limits other people project onto you and advocating for yourself. But before we get into this week's stories, I want to acknowledge that I'm recording from stolen and Gadigal land and pay my respect to Gadigal elders past and present, and also recognise that the area where FBI Radio is situated, Redfern, has long been a place of storytelling, strength, resistance and resilience for First Nations communities. The voices in this week's episode, Idayat and Ayla, are not necessarily overcoming physical barriers, but internal ones other people have placed upon them that try to keep them small. In asking the question, what happens when they refuse to bend to others' expectations of them as deficient or lacking, they realise that it's not them who needs to adjust, it's everyone else. As a young girl, Idayat is scared to speak her mind. She stutters. But as she becomes an adult, she grows to realise her stutter isn't an impediment, and it's time that she claimed her voice, like a preacher.
My name is Idayat, and I'm speaking today because I've decided that my voice matters too. I didn't always believe that. Let me take you back. I'm 14 in secondary school. The class is civic education, and the teacher is asking a question. I know the answer. My hand shoots up. I'm anxious and eager. It tells me to answer. I stand up, and in the process, I stutter. The teacher sighs loudly and dramatically. He looks at me and says, "Idayat, why do you sound like a generator?" My classmates laugh. My face burns. I sink into my chair, wishing I could disappear. And I attempt to by laying my head on the table to hide my face so no one could see me cry. Experiences like this made me think less of my voice. I was at a crucial developmental age, and the cruelty of that teacher made an impact on me. It's not that I stopped speaking altogether. For instance, I would still argue with my friends. But I started to believe I wasn't qualified for important things or joyful things, like starting a YouTube channel or recording a video about a career I was passionate about. It would take me hours to record a 1-minute video, and that wasn't only because I stuttered. It was also because I had internalized that my voice didn't matter. My stutter made me resentful too, as it made me afraid of confrontations. The other person would always talk faster, while my words would get stuck in my throat. So whenever someone offended me, I would keep it in and bottle it up. Meanwhile, in my head, I would confront them 1,000 times. But that isn't fun at all. It made me not like myself. Thankfully, I grew. I don't really understand the mechanics behind how aging changes people, but it happened to me. Maybe it was becoming a feminist and discovering a world of brilliant, powerful women with unshakable voices. Maybe it was a lecturer in my undergraduate degree who, during a presentation, listened to me so intently. It cancelled the time limit just for me. Stuttering changes how time flows. 5 minutes becomes 7 minutes. And perhaps it was scoring the highest for that presentation and getting a standing ovation from my classmates. Or meeting new friends who I felt comfortable stuttering in front of because they didn't react. Other people tend to grimace when they hear me stutter, but my new friend listened like I wasn't stuttering at all. It was probably a accumulation of everything. All I knew is that time went by and I grew, and this growth changed me. Not into a person who no longer stutters, but into a person who feels their voice is valid regardless. I started confronting others and stuttering while doing so. At first, I was terrified. My heart would beat fast, my fingers would tingle, and I always made sure to speak my mind. Here's another scenario. I'm back at a shoe store a week after buying a new pair from them. The sole has completely separated from the heel. I am angry because I spent my hard-earned money on the pair. I take a deep breath and vent to the manager. I do this while stuttering, but I make sure I speak my mind. And it feels very good. It feels good to not carry resentment. It feels good to be angry and say my piece. While my interpersonal engagements improved, I still struggled in school. I was doing my master's and we had to deliver presentations frequently. It was a new environment. I was nervous. I wanted to impress my new faculty. But I stuttered, and that was a fact. There was nothing I could do except relax into it. One time, after stuttering during the presentation, I became sad. I spoke to my mentor about it, how depressive it can be to not excel, not because of a lack of knowledge, but from an inability I had no control over. And his response was something I've heard there ever since. He said, "Learn to speak like a preacher, and we don't mind your stutter. We love you like that." I was moved to tears. His words made me feel seen, which is not common. When I had to defend my master's thesis, I was terrified of the 10-minute presentation. My mentor spoke to the board about my stutter and my time limit was increased. In moments like that, I felt that I and my voice mattered. Even if I stutter, my true community will always make space for me. I'm 25 now and I'm doing a PhD. I'm grown, but I also see myself as a 5-year-old adult. In adulthood, I'm just a toddler. There's still a future ahead of me with vast abundance in it. I'm eager to navigate this life. When I was a child and a teenager, I was told my stutter would disappear when I got older. Throughout my teenage years and early 20s, I anticipated this change. I couldn't wait to stop stuttering. But today, I still stutter. and my life isn't any worse for it. In fact, it's better because whenever I speak, I'm reminded that I have a choice to make. The choice to let myself live regardless of how I speak. My mindset now is that my stutter is not a flaw. It's just how I speak, and it won't matter in the spaces and communities where I'm seen, accepted, and loved. And so, in my life, I have a pact with myself to always stand upon my stage and speak like a preacher.
You're listening to All the Best, proudly sponsored by the Art Gallery of New South Wales on FBI Radio 94.5. I'm Gabriella Accaria. That story was produced by Idayat Jinadu. Sound design was by Mel Bakewell, and the supervising producer was Evana. Ayla spent years hiding her deafness. She did it as a means of trying to keep up with a society that didn't accommodate for her, and pushing through without asking for what she needed. When barriers got in her way, she blamed herself. But everything changed when Ayla realised her own perspective of her disability was what was holding her back, that believing her deafness was a bad part of her. Then someone reminded her that access isn't a privilege, it's a right. Content warning for this story. There are mentions of domestic violence.
Ayla was 2 years old before she was diagnosed as deaf. She wasn't speaking, and she wasn't hitting her milestones. And she had this peculiar habit of lying down and pressing her ear to the earth.
I would put my ear to the ground to feel the beat of things. So I always say, like, stop doing that, because I would just start there onto the ground with my ear up.
When the doctors told Ayla's mother what was going on, they didn't just diagnose Ayla as deaf. They also diagnosed her future.
My mum had been told Ayla would never be able to speak, to not be able to have the same opportunities as other children. It was very, very negative from what my mum has told me. And basically, it was like children always need levels of support. There was very much that medical model of thinking when it came to disability. And so that gave my mum this sort of a bit of a mission to teach me how to speak.
Ayla's mom believed speech was the key to opportunity.
Which is actually the truth, because a lot of non-speaking deaf people don't have a lot of job opportunities. There's a really huge gap in Australia for the deaf community.
So there was daily training, learning to make one sound at a time. Ayla remembers blowing a feather into a cup and being rewarded with snack food.
And I will have to blow it into the cup, and I get a couple of twisties and repeat that until I learn the letter H. And then the same with slap to do that. So they would mold my mouth and then use your fingers to actually sound it out. And when I look back, I'm like, that is so clever, like how people actually team up with how to do that.
By the time Ayla was 6, she could speak and read lips with fluency. And that meant the doctor's prediction was wrong. Ayla was sent to a mainstream school just like everyone else around her. But the school was mainstream, not inclusive. Ayla has no recollection of anyone else with disability there. She said at first, being the only deaf kid felt pretty cool. It made her unique and interesting, and kind of popular.
When I first started, it was like a novelty because I was the only deaf person there. So I had lots of people asking me about it. I love that.
But that feeling of deaf as novelty wore off in one moment. Ayla was maybe 12, and the class had an assignment. Play a song that you love, and then give a presentation on what the lyrics meant to you. Ayla got really into the assignment. She said she put a song on, and then she poured her heart into discussing the lyrics. But it turned out the song she played didn't match the lyrics she read out loud. And she looked out as her classmates erupted in laughter.
That was a moment I hated being deaf. I felt a lot of shame embarrassed, very embarrassed, because I actually really resonated with the lyrics, and so I was going on about how meaningful it was to me, and I felt like an imposter, and then I felt like I wasn't good enough. Then I think for the first time then was when I realised that having a disability, a lot of people actually saw it as a negative thing, and I went from this experience of being deaf as part of my identity to being deaf as something that was an ugly part of me, something that was a shameful part of me. My mum, who was my biggest advocate, passed away from cancer when I was 14. So that was also a big thing to navigate as a teenager as well, that suddenly the person who was my advocate, the one who was telling me that I was good enough, don't worry what other people think and all of that, and then I lost that person.
So Ayla moved in with an auntie who was loving and kind and did the best she could to pick up the pieces. But Ayla would spend over a decade pretending she wasn't deaf. She wouldn't acknowledge it. And because she was too uncomfortable to talk about it, others were too. So it became this giant elephant in the room that followed her wherever she went.
So obviously the tricky part of that was you quickly find out that I'm deaf when I don't hear. But I was ignoring it, so that people were ignoring it because nobody had interacted with deaf people before. So they didn't know how to put it to me. And I didn't know how to ask for what I needed because I was too busy trying to hide that part of me.
And when her deafness was acknowledged, it was often through praise, but the kind of praise that reinforced the idea that deafness was something bad.
So we get, oh, you're so inspiring despite the being deaf. So it always perpetuated that being deaf was negative, and I overcome it. I can talk, I've done this, I overcome it.
So her main goal in life became crystal clear: be seen as capable, despite being deaf.
I had this mentality, I asked for help. I'm going to be seen as someone that can't do things, they're going to say that me being deaf means that I can't measure up or anything like that. And it kind of started to affect all my other parts of my life. And what that meant was that I never actually advocated during those times of systemic injustices where there was discrimination. Like I was fired from one of my first jobs because I couldn't answer the phone. And that's actually unlawful. I could have, but I didn't because I truly believed that was my fault. I couldn't answer the phone. I'm deaf.
This mindset impacted all aspects of Ayla's life, from school to employment to friendships to intimate relationships. Ayla remembers all her friends getting boyfriends, except her. She was the last one. She felt left behind. But when she was 19, she got her first boyfriend. And she remembers feeling grateful that he liked her, despite her deafness. And because of that, she didn't heed the warning signs.
There was a lot of red flags, but I didn't recognize any of those red flags because I was too encumbered with the idea of, oh my gosh, someone actually likes me, someone paid attention to me, even though I'm deaf. Because he played onto it as well. He was like, I love you, I'm the only one that really loves you.
At first, she thought his involvement in everything was care. He helped her make all her appointments. He came to them. He became this bridge between her and the hearing-orientated world. And soon, she found herself completely reliant on him.
It was actually a sign of control. Light had to go everywhere with me. Do very much. And then I almost had to panic, oh, I can't do this on my own either.
After they moved in together, the physical violence started. Ayla withdrew more and more from friends and family because she still wanted to be seen as doing well. She didn't want anyone to know what was happening.
It was very gradually up later because it was hard to explain to my friends because I didn't want them to judge me, or that sense of shame was coming into play. So it became more isolated as a result, didn't go out as much.
And then Ayla had a baby, and now she felt she needed her boyfriend, her abuser, more than ever.
I've hearing stories where if you have a disability that's referred to DCP, the Department of Child Protection. Like there was another deaf woman who got her child taken off her, and it would have been a lot complex, but it was to do with not being able to hear her baby wake up.
So now not only did she fear she wasn't capable for herself without him, but she feared she wasn't capable for this other being she had brought into the world. And he used that fear as control.
Women with disability are twice as likely to experience domestic and family violence in Australia. And all the abusive relationship is that there is something that they latch on, and it could be self-esteem. They latch onto that and they play it. So internalized ableism, all of that about that. The common denominator, the ability to manipulate and prey and create trauma bonds.
So her thoughts and view around her own disability was a huge barrier to her finding safety. But also, she had to contend with plain old inaccessibility.
Like I couldn't call the police, for one. So there was no way to alert. And then that she came up against me when I eventually wanted to get an intervention order because I needed to have proof of domestic violence, but because I never called, they were like, I hadn't had proof.
To me, one of the most shocking parts of her story is this. She was a young mom, isolated, and she didn't even get linked to a mother's group. She told me she didn't even know it existed. She didn't know it was a thing. She assumed it was offered, but she missed it.
I didn't know. That's what I mean. I never knew that this was a normal experience for parents because nobody ever told me. Like, you hear about these things. I didn't hear them. They were some lack of information accessibility.
Ayla eventually did get out. It wasn't actually the physical violence that pushed her to leave. It was cheating.
Because I saw that as the betrayal, with more the betrayal, because he told me he really loved me despite the fact that I'm deaf.
Once that narrative that she clung to burst, she could no longer stay. And after Ayla got out, she moved in with family, and a few years later, she found love. And this time a healthy, mutual love with someone who never made her feel lesser than or like she should be grateful. She said they were equals. She went on to marry and have 2 more children, and they spent nearly a decade together. They aren't married anymore, but she says there is still deep respect, love, friendship, and healthy co-parenting. During that decade, she said from the outside world, her life really looked like she was doing great. She had 3 beautiful children. She went to university to study social work. But this internalized narrative that her deafness was this bad part of her, that it was her job to overcome, it still followed her everywhere. And at university, access to support was often delayed. She said for her lectures, the transcripts and captions always arrived 6 weeks later.
So you're often 6 weeks behind trying to catch up. So that was my classic routine for uni, that I was always trying to catch up.
Ayla was never mad about this. She thought it was just the way it was. But then one of her lecturers told her he didn't even know if captions existed in his class.
And the teacher was not aware of any accessibility features with his class at all. The whole thing was so delayed, but I actually got my transcripts and lecture notes from that 3 days after my final exam. So I went the whole entire course with no access to materials, lectures, nothing.
After Ayla passed the class, she told her course coordinator how grateful she was. Grateful that she passed without access to any of the materials. Ayla said she was shocked by his reaction.
He was like, I'm so angry. I would complain. You're paying for a course. You can get what you want. Why do you have to pay? Like, it's lucky that you're very grounded in politics and you actually passed without having to access the materials. It's like, well done. But I would have complained. I would have been like, I'm not paying. And I thought, oh, at least I'm here. I'm able to do this. And he goes, that's when he said, it's all very well and good to be grateful. We love gratitude. But it's your basic right to access your education.
Ayla was stunned, but her course coordinator's anger reached her, and it changed everything. Ayla looked back over her whole life with a new lens.
It's my basic right to access all of the sports I needed. I never got growing up. It was my basic right to access a job. And if the supports weren't there to enable me to do the job, that wasn't on me. That wasn't a failure on me. That was a failure on the workplace. That was a failure on the education system. That was a failure on the doctors who were making judgments of my parenting abilities. Because, that wasn't a failure on me. I wasn't the one that was failing the world. The world was failing me.
You're listening to All the Best on FBI Radio 94.5. I'm Gabriella Accaria. That story was produced by Carey Scheer as part of the Purple Orange podcast. And if that story brought up anything for you, support is available via 1-800-RESPECT, 1-800-737-732, and Beyond Blue, 1300-224636. And if you love listening to audio stories, keep listening to All the Best for unique stories from independent audio makers from so-called Sydney and around the country. From travelators hidden under Hyde Park, to the first female astronaut being catapulted into outer space, we capture stories from local and beyond. You can catch our live radio broadcast on Sundays at 9:30am on FBI Radio 94.5. We also release a brand new episode every Tuesday at 4pm on allthebestradio.com, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us now so you never miss an episode. All the Best is made at FBI Radio on Gadigal land, in association with SYN and 3RRR on Wurundjeri, Woi Wurrung and Boon Wurrung lands, and 8CCC on Arrente and Mooramongu lands. The All the Best executive producer is Mel Bakewell. Katerina Fraga-Matos is our events and partnerships coordinator. Kwame Slusher is our production manager. Patrick McKenzie is our community coordinator. And a special shout out to all the volunteers who helped to make All the Best possible. Shining Bird composed our theme music, and Annie Hamilton designed the artwork. We're heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And we're made possible by the Art Gallery of New South Wales and the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find our full archive of almost 700 episodes at allthebestradio.com. I'm Gabriella Accaria. Thanks for listening.